In this lecture, we are going to start adding an option to modify the color of the underline. As a reminder, I have the static version of the block in another tab. If I hover my mouse over the heading, an underline appears. The color for the underline should be modifiable. At the moment, an underline never appears for our block. It's because the styles don't add a color to the H2 element. Therefore, a line will never appear. That's going to be our goal. We will add an option for modifying the line color. After doing so, this color will be applied to the H2 element. As a result, the underline effect should appear. Let's get started. First, we must consider where to load the option for changing colors. Back in the editor, there are two areas for modifying a block. There's the toolbar and sidebar. The toolbar is great for quickly modifying options as opposed to the sidebar that offers room for complex UI elements. WordPress recommends adding color options directly in the sidebar. The question becomes, how? WordPress has a component for helping us load input elements in the sidebar. Let's give it a try. Inside your editor, open the index.js file. Next, we are going to modify the import statement for the block editor package. Let's grab a component called InspectorControls. The InspectorControls component is a special type of component. It'll render elements in the sidebar. Most of the heavy lifting is handled by WordPress. As long as we're using this component, everything else will be taken care of. Scroll to the Edit function. Inside the return statement, let's add the InspectorControls component with a closing tag. This component should sit at the root level of your component. It should not be a child of another tag, nor should you add elements that will appear in the main content area. Everything written inside these tags will appear in the sidebar. Before we start adding content, our editor is throwing an error. We can hover our mouse over the error to view the message. Visual Studio Code states that components should only have a single parent element. We can resolve our issue with a fragment element. Let's wrap our content with a fragment. It's perfectly fine to use a fragment. WordPress will be able to find the InspectorControls component. Next, let's insert content inside the InspectorControls component. Up until now, we've been using self-closing tags for writing components. However, components can have opening and closing tags with content inserted into them. This feature must be supported by the component. In the case of the InspectorControls component, adding inner content is supported. Let's refresh the page to check out what happens. By default, nothing will appear on the sidebar until the block has been selected. Once the block is selected, the Gutenberg editor will update the sidebar with the settings for the block. This includes the content from the InspectorControls component. Our content sits between the description and advanced panel. I don't think our content has enough room to breathe. Ideally, we should add the color options under a panel. A panel is a section in the sidebar that can be toggled. The advanced panel is an example. We can toggle this panel's appearance to reduce distraction. WordPress offers a component for creating this UI element. Let's give it a try. Switch back to the text editor. Scroll to the top of the file. At the top, import a component called PanelBody from a package called WordPress/components. I'm introducing a new package called components. This package will contain several generic components that we can include in our blocks. Throughout this course, we will explore the various components that can be found in this package. In this example, we're grabbing the PanelBody component. This component will create a panel that can be toggled. It'll match the design of the Gutenberg editor. Scroll back to the Edit function. Inside the InspectorControls component, replace the content with the PanelBody component. Next, let's insert some text. Unlike the InspectorControls component, we can add a title to the component. On the PanelBody component, add a property called title. The value for this property will be the double underscore function. We should always translate our text. We're not translating the inner text of the component because we will be replacing it with a different component. For the title, let's set the text to colors. The text domain will be Udemy Plus. The title property will place the text in the head section of the panel. As for the inner contents, it'll appear from within the body of the panel. Time to test our block. Refresh the page in the browser. After selecting the block, our panel appears on the sidebar. Perfect! We can start adding an input for changing the color of the underline. In the next lecture, let's tackle this task.